This wasn't just a scandal. This was a declaration of war. In the glittering heart of New York's elite at the most exclusive gala of the year. Two women stood at the center of a silent battlefield. One was the wife Aria Vance, a woman carved from ice and old money. The other, Serafina Rivers, the ambitious mistress who believed she had already won. The weapon of choice, a glass of $5,000 a bottle Bordeaux, spilled deliberately onto a priceless white gown. But the mistress made one fatal mistake. She mistook her opponent's silence for weakness. She didn't realize the trap was already sprung. The air at the Metropolitan Museum of Art's annual Unity Gala wasn't just air. It was a pressurized, perfumed atmosphere of power. Tonight it felt like a tomb to Aria Vance. She stood beside her husband, Marcus Vance, the man of the hour. He was being honored as Titan of the Year by the industry. His hand was at the small of her back, a proprietary gesture that felt less like affection and more like an anchor. He smiled, a dazzling white flash of expensive dentistry for the cameras. Aria smiled back, a practiced, precise curving of her lips that didn't dare touch her eyes. Her eyes were the color of a winter sky, and tonight they held a dangerous frost. "Aria, darling, you look breathtaking," whispered Anastasia DeWitt, a rival from her Vassar days, whose husband was on the board of Marcus's company, Vance Innovations. "Thank you, Anastasia. You must tell me where you found that unique shade of chartreuse," Aria replied, her voice smooth as silk. The compliment landed like a velvet-wrapped stone. Anastasia's smile faltered before she was swept away by the crowd. Aria was wearing a custom gown by a designer so exclusive he only worked for 3 clients worldwide. It was fashioned from heavy ivory-white silk, falling in a clean architectural line from her shoulders to the floor. No sequins, no vulgar lace, just pure, unblemished white. An intentional choice. She wanted to look pure, untouchable, like alabaster. It was a lie, of course. She was deeply, irreparably touched. Tainted not by her own actions, but by his. Marcus leaned in his breath, smelling of expensive scotch. "Work the room, Aria. Arthur Holloway is by the Egyptian wing. Remind him whose side he's on for the Singapore deal." "Of course, Marcus," she murmured. His side. It used to be their side. She'd known about the affair for 6 months, 2 weeks and 4 days. She hadn't found a text. She hadn't smelled cheap perfume. Marcus was too smart for that. Aria had found it in the one place he thought she'd never look, the corporate ledger. Aria wasn't just a wife. She was a Vance by marriage, but she was a Davenport by birth. Her family hadn't just invested in Marcus's startup. Her father's $50 million seed money was his startup, and she had retained a 40% stake, a fact Marcus seemed to conveniently forget. She also retained her father's financial mind. The discovery had been a single anomalous line item, SR Consulting, $75,000, project development. There was no SR Consulting, not a real one anyway. Aria had hired Mr. Davies, a man who specialized in discreet inquiries, the kind that never saw a courtroom but could topple empires. Davies was ex-MI6, precise and utterly without sentiment. Within 48 hours, he had a name, Serafina Rivers, 26 years old, a marketing coordinator in Marcus's own company. Ambitious, ruthless, and possessing a portfolio of assets, a new condo in Tribeca, a leased Mercedes G-Wagon that far outstripped her $90,000 salary. The $75,000 was just the first payment. Davies had found 3 more, totaling over $300,000, funneled through shell accounts. It wasn't just adultery. It was embezzlement. He was stealing from his own company. From her company. Tonight, Marcus was receiving an award for the very success he was busy siphoning off to his mistress. The irony was so bitter, it almost made Arya laugh. But she wouldn't laugh. Not yet. She scanned the room, her gaze gliding over the billionaires and senators. Her eyes found Mr. Harrison, her personal head of security. He was not on Marcus's payroll. He was on her family's. Harrison had been with the Davenports since before Arya was born. He stood near the main entrance, built like a linebacker, wearing a flawless tuxedo and an earpiece. His eyes met hers across the crowded hall. She gave a single imperceptible nod. He nodded back. All assets are in place. The orchestra began to play a soaring piece by Vivaldi. Marcus, ever the performer, took her hand and kissed her knuckles. "You're the perfect wife, Arya. You know that, don't you?" "I try my best to be exactly what you deserve, Marcus," she said, her voice a perfect crystalline bell. He beamed, missing the Arctic chill in her words. He thought her a beautiful, placid doll. He thought her a trophy. He had forgotten that the most beautiful statues are carved from the hardest stone. Tonight she would remind him. She excused herself, gliding away from him toward the grand staircase. She needed to be in position. The trap was set. The bait was her husband's success. All she had to do was wait for the serpent to arrive. And Arya knew Serafina couldn't resist the apple. The grand doors of the great hall swung open, and Serafina Rivers made her entrance. If Arya was alabaster, Serafina was a wildfire. She wore a dress the color of fresh blood. It was a scandal of crimson silk and daring cutouts clinging to every curve of her body. Her hair was a waterfall of jet black, and her lips were painted in a matching aggressive red. She looked magnificent and utterly, desperately out of place. Old money whispered, new money stared. Arya watched her from the mezzanine. Serafina hadn't just come to the gala. She had come as Marcus's guest. Arya's private investigator, Mr. Davies, had confirmed it. Marcus hadn't been foolish enough to put her on the main list. He had used one of his anonymous donor tickets, a perk of his sponsorship, to sneak her in. It was a slap in the face, a brazen act of dominance. He wanted both his wife and his mistress in the same room, a testament to his power. He truly thought he was untouchable. Serafina's eyes, sharp and predatory, scanned the crowd. She wasn't looking at the art. She was looking for him. She found Marcus, and a slow, triumphant smile spread across her face. Marcus, standing with the mayor, saw her. He didn't smile, but his posture shifted. He preened. He was a fool. Arya felt a cold, clean anger settle in her stomach. It wasn't the hot, messy jealousy Serafina probably expected. It was the precise surgical rage of a CEO whose partner had just attempted a hostile takeover. Arya descended the staircase, each step a deliberate, measured beat. The crowd parted for her. She was, after all, Arya Davenport Vance. She was the queen of this domain. She saw Serafina get a glass of champagne from a passing waiter, and then with purpose begin to move through the crowd. Not toward Marcus, that would be too obvious, but toward Arya. Good, Arya thought. Come to me. The plan had been meticulous. It had been forming for months. The first step had been realizing the affair was a symptom, not the disease. The disease was Marcus's belief that her father's company was his. Arya's flashback was sharp. 6 months ago, sitting in Mr. Davies's sterile office, looking at photos. Serafina laughing as she got into Marcus's Bentley. Serafina wearing a diamond necklace. Arya recognized one Marcus had claimed was a loss on a business trip. "What do you wish me to do, Mrs. Vance?" Davies had asked, his voice a gravelly monotone. "I want to know everything," Arya had said, her voice shaking only slightly. "Not just about her. About him. I want to know where every single dollar he's invested without my approval has gone." The file he produced 2 weeks later was what broke her. It wasn't the photos of the hotels in Paris or the apartment in Tribeca. It was the bank transfers. Marcus was systematically dissolving the liquid assets from the Davenport family trust, which he managed, and funneling them into high-risk personal ventures under Serafina's name. He wasn't just cheating. He was building a new life, a new empire, with Arya's inheritance. He was planning to leave her with the hollowed-out shell of her father's legacy. The restraining order had been Susan Gray's idea. Susan was Arya's lawyer, a woman with a shark's smile and a spine of tungsten. "We can't just file for divorce, Arya," Susan had said, tapping her pen on the file. "He'll hide the assets. He'll drag it out for years. You'll be in court while he's on a beach with her, living on your money. No. We need leverage. We need to strike." The restraining order wasn't against Marcus. It was against Serafina Rivers. "On what grounds?" Arya had asked. "Corporate espionage," Susan said. "She's an employee. He's the CEO. He is feeding her proprietary data and company funds. We'll frame it as her extorting him. We'll add a harassment clause. We have your testimony that you've seen her near your home. Mr. Davies's photos will confirm it." "She's never been near my home," Arya said. "She will be," Susan replied. And she had been. Arya had arranged it. She'd accidentally leaked her private yoga instructor's schedule. Serafina, in her arrogance, had shown up at the same studio trying to invade Arya's space. Davies's photographer was waiting. The temporary restraining order was granted by a judge at 4:00 p.m. that afternoon, just 3 hours before the gala. It explicitly forbade Serafina Rivers from coming within 100 yards of Arya Vance or her place of business, which tonight was this gala. Serafina, currently sipping champagne 50 yards away, and closing, had no idea she had just walked into a federal-level legal trap. Arya positioned herself near the Rodin sculptures, a strategic point in the room. It was well lit, highly visible, and near the main thoroughfare. Mr. Harrison was 15 feet away, ostensibly guarding the art, but his focus was entirely on her. Serafina was getting closer. She stopped to talk to a producer, her laugh too loud, her crimson dress a gash in the tasteful sea of navy and black. She was a heat-seeking missile, and Arya was her target. Arya took a flute of mineral water from a tray. She held it loosely. She waited. Her heart was not pounding. It was slow, steady, and cold, like a drum beating time for an execution. The predator was now just feet away, her eyes locked on the alabaster wife. Serafina's smile was a bright, cruel blade. She was ready to make her move. The narrative that Serafina Rivers was a brilliant predatory mastermind was one she had carefully crafted herself. The truth Arya knew was far more pathetic. Serafina was a weapon, but Marcus was the one aiming her, and her own arrogance made her a sloppy one. The real key to the entire operation wasn't Mr. Davies or Susan Gray. It was a woman named Chloe Benson. 3 months ago, a nervous young woman had managed to get through Arya's private security line. She was a temp in the Vance Innovations accounting department. She was also Seraphina's former roommate. Mrs. Vance, Chloe had stammered, perched on the edge of a priceless Louis XVI chair in Aria's sitting room. I think you're in trouble. I think the whole company is. Aria had listened, her hands steepled. Chloe painted a portrait of Seraphina that was all sharp edges and desperate ambition. She wasn't always like this, Chloe said, twisting a tissue in her hands. But then she saw an opening. She stole my final project from my MBA, a proposal for streamlining international logistics. She presented it as her own to Mr. Vance. That's how she got his attention. Aria's eyes narrowed. She stole your work. She said it was just borrowing. But then she got the promotion. And then she started seeing him. And she changed. Chloe's eyes filled with a mixture of fear and resentment. She brags about it. She calls you the Ice Queen and the museum piece. She told me that Mr. Vance was going to retire you, that he was setting up a new venture with her, and that they were going to be in Singapore by Christmas, and you'd be left with nothing. Aria sat perfectly still. Why are you telling me this, Miss Benson? Because she's not just betraying you, Mrs. Vance. She's betraying the company. And she stole my work. She ruined my chance. Chloe took a shaky breath. And honestly, she's just plain cruel. She's bragging about destroying you and I. I don't think you deserve that. Aria saw the opening. This wasn't just a jilted roommate. It was an asset. Miss Benson, what if I could ensure that your proposal was seen by the right people? What if I could ensure that your career wasn't over, but was just beginning? Chloe's eyes widened. What would I have to do? Just keep listening, Aria had said. She trusts you. She brags to you. I want to know every time she brags. Chloe Benson had become Aria's inside woman. It was Chloe who provided the final damning piece of evidence, the password to Seraphina's personal laptop, where she and Marcus kept their Singapore plans. The laptop contained the offshore account numbers, the timelines, and Marcus's explicit instructions on how to drain the funds. It was corporate treason on a scale that made Aria's blood run cold. Marcus wasn't just planning to leave her. He was planning to bankrupt the company her father had built and leave thousands of employees jobless, all to fund a new life with a 26-year-old marketing coordinator. Now at the Gala, Aria wasn't just circulating. She was setting the board for the next phase of the war. She found Arthur Holloway, the 70-year-old board member who had been her father's best friend. Arthur, you look well, she said, kissing his cheek. Aria, my dear, your father would be so proud tonight. Marcus is a prodigy. Aria's smile was tinged with sadness. Arthur, I'm worried about Marcus. He's been distracted, working so hard. I'm afraid he's missing things. Arthur's brow furrowed. Missing what the Q4 projections are stellar. I know, but I saw some irregularities in the logistics accounts, large consulting fees I didn't recognize. I'm sure it's nothing but. It's my father's legacy. Would you do me a personal favor and call for an emergency audit tomorrow, just for my peace of mind? I'd hate for Marcus's big night to be ruined by procedure. Arthur looked at her, truly looked at her. He saw the genuine, though manufactured worry in her eyes. He knew her. He knew she had her father's brain. If she was worried about an account, it was worth a look. For you, Aria. Of course. I'll make the motion first thing. Consider it done." "Thank you, Arthur. You're a true friend." One piece in place. Next, she moved to Diana Croft, the most ruthless financial journalist at Forbes. Diana was nursing a gin and tonic, her eyes scanning for weakness. Diana. "Wonderful piece on the solar venture last month," Arya said. Diana turned surprised. Arya Vance rarely spoke to the press. "Mrs. Vance, thank you. Big night for your husband." "It is," Arya said, leaning in slightly as if sharing a secret. "He's poured his whole life into it. Sometimes I worry he's too trusting." Diana's journalistic senses tingled. "How so?" "Oh, you know, he delegates so much, especially in his new international ventures. He has such faith in his team. I just hope that faith is well placed. One bad apple, you know." Arya let the breadcrumb hang in the air. She didn't say embezzlement. She didn't say fraud. She just planted the seed of doubt. "It would be a terrible shame," Arya continued, "if someone were taking advantage of his genius. Keep an eye on the Vance Innovation stock tomorrow morning. I have a feeling things might get volatile." Diana's eyes widened. This was more than a socialite's prattling. This was a tip. "Volatile why?" "I've already said too much." Arya smiled, tapping Diana's arm. "Enjoy the party." Two pieces in place. Arya turned her work done. She saw Serafina, who had been watching her. She saw the jealousy radiating off the younger woman. Serafina saw Arya the queen holding court, talking to the very people Serafina longed to know. And now Serafina was done waiting. She squared her shoulders, picked up a fresh glass of wine from a tray. Not champagne this time, but a deep staining Bordeaux, and began her final approach. The air grew thick. Mr. Harrison subtly shifted his weight, his hand moving to his lapel. Arya stood still, waiting. The white dress, the red wine. The stage was set. Serafina Rivers moved like a shark cutting through the murmuring sea of high society. She had one target. She had waited months for this moment, a public confrontation to stake her claim. In her mind, this was her coronation. She stopped 2 feet from Arya. Her perfume, a heavy, musky scent, was an assault. "Arya," she said. Her voice was too familiar, layered with a sickening false sympathy. "I hardly recognized you. You look tired." The few people nearby, sensing the sudden drop in temperature, fell silent. Arya turned slowly, her expression one of mild curiosity, as if addressing a slightly confused waitress. "I'm sorry, have we been introduced? I'm Arya Vance." The color rose in Serafina's neck. "Oh, that's good. That's really good. Playing the Ice Queen. We both know who I am, Arya." "I know you are Serafina Rivers, a junior employee in my husband's marketing department." Arya said, her voice clear and precise. "What I don't know is why you're speaking to me." A small crowd was forming. This was better than the auction. Serafina's smirk was pure acid. "I'm just here to congratulate you. It must be so hard, standing by your man, knowing you're not the one who inspires him anymore." Arya didn't flinch. "Inspiration is a fickle thing, Ms. Rivers. Integrity, however, is not. You'll find it's in short supply these days." "Are you calling me a whore?" Serafina hissed, her facade cracking. "I would never be so crude," Arya replied, taking a small sip of her water. "I'm simply stating that you are an employee at a company event. You are speaking to the wife of the CEO. I suggest you remember your place." This was the final straw. "My place?" Serafina laughed a sharp, ugly sound. My place is by his side. My place is in his bed. My place is in Singapore, while you're left here to manage your charities. She had said it, the one word that confirmed everything. Singapore. Arya's face remained a perfect placid mask, but inside the final lock clicked into place. The confession. You're pathetic, Serafina spat her eyes wild. You're an empty, cold porcelain doll, and this dress, white, trying to tell everyone you're still so pure, it's a joke. Arya looked down at her white dress, then back up at Serafina. And red. So desperate, trying to mark territory that will never, ever be yours. The calm, dismissive truth of it struck Serafina harder than any slap. She was nothing. She was a passing fancy, and Arya knew it. In that moment, Serafina's frustration, her ambition, and her humiliation boiled over. She had to leave a mark. She had to stain this woman who refused to break. "Oh, you bitch," Serafina snarled, and she tripped. It was a clumsy theatrical lurch. The glass of deep red Bordeaux left her hand arcing through the air in a perfect slow-motion wave. It struck Arya square in the chest. The gasp from the crowd was a physical force. The wine, dark as blood, exploded across the pristine ivory-white silk. It splashed up onto Arya's neck, dripping down the architectural folds of the skirt pooling at her feet. It was a desecration. Serafina straightened up her hand, flying to her mouth in a mockery of shock. "Oh my God! Arya, I am so clumsy. Look at your dress. It's ruined." The smirk in her eyes told the real story. She had won. She had marked her. She had proven in front of everyone that Arya could be soiled. The hall was dead silent. Marcus across the room had seen the commotion and was starting to push his way through a look of thunder on his face. Diana Croft, the journalist, was already taking notes. Arthur Holloway looked horrified. Arya Vance stood drenched in red wine, the centerpiece of her own humiliation. She didn't gasp. She didn't cry. She didn't even look at the stain. She held Serafina's triumphant, vicious gaze. A tiny, almost imperceptible smile touched the corner of her lips. She lifted her chin, looked just past Serafina's shoulder, and spoke one simple, devastating word. "Now." For a fraction of a second, Serafina Rivers savored her victory. She had done the unthinkable. She had shattered the Ice Queen's facade in the most public way possible. Then two things happened at once. The first was the sound of a professional's voice, loud and clear, cutting through the stunned silence. "Ma'am, step away from Mrs. Vance." The second was the feeling of two hands, hard as steel, gripping her upper arms. Serafina yelped, spinning around. Mr. Harrison was on her left, and another man in an identical suit, one of Arya's private team, not the museum's, was on her right. They didn't just hold her. They seized her, their grips painfully tight. "What are you doing?" Serafina shrieked, her voice cracking. "Get your hands off me. It was an accident." "Ma'am, you need to come with us, immediately," Harrison said, his voice a flat, emotionless wall. "You can't do this." Serafina thrashed, her crimson dress twisting. Marcus, tell them to let me go." Marcus had finally shoved his way to the epicenter. He saw Arya stained red. He saw his mistress held captive by his wife's security. His face was a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. "Harrison, what in the hell do you think you're doing?" Marcus bellowed, reaching for the security guard. "Stand down. That is a direct order." Mr. Harrison didn't even look at him. He kept his eyes on Arya. "My orders come from Mrs. Vance, sir, and Mrs. Vance alone." The statement hung in the air, a stunning public transfer of power. Marcus froze his hand, still outstretched. The entire gala, hundreds of New York's most powerful people, were witnessing a CEO being overruled by his own household staff. "Let her go, Arya," Marcus snarled, turning his fury on his wife. "This is insane. She apologized. It was an accident." Arya finally moved. She stepped forward, the ruined white dress swishing. The wine was still dripping onto the marble floor. She looked past Marcus, past Serafina, to the museum's official head of security, who was rushing over his face, pale with panic. "This woman," Arya said, her voice amplified by the silence, "is Serafina Rivers." "Arya, stop it," Marcus commanded. Arya ignored him. "She is not an invited guest at this gala. She is an employee of my husband's, whom he smuggled in under a false name." A new, more interested murmur swept the crowd. This was escalating from a catfight to a full-blown corporate scandal. "That's a lie," Serafina screamed, still struggling. "I'm his guest." "Tell them, Marcus. Furthermore," Arya continued, her voice gaining strength, "as of 4:00 p.m. this afternoon, Ms. Rivers is the subject of a temporary restraining order file number 3A9822, filed in the state of New York." Serafina's struggling stopped. The blood drained from her face. What did you say?" Arya produced a folded document from her small, elegant clutch. She didn't hand it to Serafina. She handed it to the museum's head of security. "The order explicitly forbids Ms. Rivers from coming within 100 yards of me, my home, or my place of business. This gala is a private event hosted by Vance Innovations. She is in direct violation of a court order." "This is ridiculous." Serafina was hyperventilating now. I was never served. I never saw any papers. You were served electronically at 4:15 p.m. to the email address you have on file with HR, Arya said coolly. "You were probably too busy getting your hair done to check it. Your presence here is a criminal offense. Your accidental spill," and here Arya's eyes bored into Serafina's, "is criminal assault." No. Marcus, she's lying. This is insane." Serafina looked at Marcus, her eyes wide with terror. But Marcus wasn't looking at her. He was looking at Arya. A new dawning horror on his face. He wasn't seeing his placid wife. He was seeing a stranger, a cold, calculating strategist who had just cornered him in front of his entire world. "Arya, whatever this is," he said, trying to keep his voice low, "call them off. We will discuss this at home. You are making a scene." "I am finishing a scene, Marcus," Arya corrected him. "One that you started." She turned back to the museum guard. "This woman is trespassing. She has violated a legal order. And she has assaulted me. I want her removed, and I will be pressing charges." "No." Serafina's scream was primal. This wasn't the plan. "Let's go," Harrison growled. He and the other guard didn't just escort her. They dragged her. Her heels scraped against the marble floor. The image was brutal and shocking. Serafina Rivers, who had entered like a queen, was being hauled out like a common criminal. "You can't do this to me," she shrieked, her face contorted. "I love him." "He loves me, Marcus. Don't let her do this, Marcus." Her voice echoed through the great hall, even after she disappeared from view. The doors slammed shut. Silence. Every eye in the room. Arthur Holloway's, Diana Croft's, the mayor's, was now locked on Marcus Vance, the Titan of the Year, who stood frozen. His mistress gone, his wife standing before him covered in the wine that symbolized his affair. Marcus Vance was a man who had built an empire on controlling the narrative. He was a master of the boardroom, the negotiation, the hostile takeover. He lived his life 10 steps ahead. In this moment, he was 1,000 steps behind. He stared at Arya, his mind racing, trying to find an exit, a spin away to regain control. The silence in the hall was deafening, broken only by the sound of Diana Croft's rapid-fire texting. "Arya," he said, his voice a low, dangerous growl. "You will regret this." "No, Marcus," Arya replied, her voice just as low, heard only by him. "You will." She saw Arthur Holloway, the board member, pushing through the crowd toward them. His face was no longer horrified. It was cold. "Marcus," Arthur said, his voice a deep baritone that commanded respect. "A word. In the anteroom. Now." It wasn't a request. It was a summons. The board was asserting its power. "Arthur, this is a private matter." Marcus tried, attempting to regain his footing. "My wife is overwrought." "She doesn't look overwrought, Marcus," Arthur said, his gaze flicking to the stain, and then back to Marcus's eyes. "She looks thorough. I'm also told," he added, pulling out his phone, "that a motion has just been filed for an emergency audit of our international logistics accounts, citing significant financial irregularities. That Marcus is a board matter." Marcus's blood ran cold. Irregularities. Logistics. He looked at Arya. Her expression was serene. It wasn't just about the affair. She knew about the money. She knew about SR Consulting. She knew about Singapore. This wasn't an emotional outburst. This was a coup. The presenter on stage, unaware, began to speak. "And now the moment we've all been waiting for. The 2025 Titan of the Year award, Mr. Marcus Vance." A smattering of confused, hesitant applause started. Marcus was trapped. On one side was the board demanding answers about the money. On the other was the stage demanding his presence. And in the middle was his wife, the architect of his demise. Arya stepped closer, so close he could smell the wine on her dress. "Here's what happens next," she whispered, her voice a sliver of ice. "You have 2 choices. Option 1, you follow Arthur into that room. You'll be pulled from the stage, and Diana Croft will print that you were escorted out by the board for suspicion of embezzlement. Your mistress will be booked for assault, and she will tell the police everything to save herself, including your little Singapore plan. You will be in a holding cell by morning. Your company, your reputation, everything, gone. By dawn." She let that sink in. Marcus's breathing was shallow. "Or," she continued, "option 2, you pull yourself together. You walk up on that stage, you accept your award, and you pretend this was all just a terrible misunderstanding with a troubled young employee. You'll smile for the cameras. You'll give your speech." "And then," he hissed, "and then," Arya said, "you will go straight from that stage to your lawyer. Because at 9:00 a.m. tomorrow, you will be resigning as CEO of Vance Innovations, citing personal health reasons. You will sign over your voting shares to me, the shares you acquired with my family's money, in exchange for my silence on the criminal matter of your embezzlement. You will walk away with nothing but the clothes on your back. And I," her voice dropped to a triumphant whisper, "will let you." It was checkmate. He could fight and lose everything, including his freedom. Or he could surrender and lose everything, but keep his name out of a federal prison. The applause on stage was growing louder. "Mr. Marcus Vance," the presenter called again, uncertainty in his voice. Marcus looked at Arya's face, at the cold, brilliant, beautiful monster she had become. He finally understood. He hadn't just married a socialite. He had married a Davenport. "You bitch," he whispered, with a new terrifying kind of respect. "Go on, Titan," she murmured. "Take your victory lap." She stepped back. With a superhuman effort, Marcus Vance smoothed his tuxedo. He forced the terror from his face, replacing it with a strained, waxen smile. He turned his back on his wife. He turned his back on the board member. And he walked step by agonizing step toward the stage, into the spotlight, to accept an award that now meant less than nothing. The crowd watched him, whispering. Arya Vance did not stay to watch. She turned, her stained dress trailing behind her like a royal robe, and walked alone toward the main exit. She ignored the whispers, the stares, the pointing fingers. Mr. Harrison was waiting by the door, holding her coat. "Is she in custody?" Arya asked, slipping her arms into the cashmere. "NYPD has her, Mrs. Vance. She's being transported downtown. Assault, trespassing, and violation of a restraining order. She's not getting out tonight." "Good." Arya pulled her coat tight. "And the other matter, ma'am, handled." She pushed open the heavy doors and stepped out into the cold, clean October night. The sirens of the police car, already pulling away with Serafina in the back, were a faint, fading wail in the distance. Arya had never felt so clean in her life. As Arya's car sped away from the museum, she didn't go home. She didn't go to her lawyer's office. She had one last piece of business to attend to. The car pulled up to a quiet, discreet bar in the West Village. She walked in. The clientele was quiet, lost in their own worlds. In a back booth, a young woman was nursing a club soda, her knuckles white. Arya slid into the booth opposite her. Chloe Benson looked up, her eyes wide with anxiety. "I saw it. On Twitter. Scandal at the Gala. They said she was dragged out. They said you were covered in wine. Did it work? Mrs. Vance?" Arya unbuttoned her coat, revealing the ruined dress. Chloe gasped. "It worked," Arya said. "It worked perfectly." Chloe let out a breath she seemed to have been holding for months. "Oh, thank God. I was so worried. When I gave you that password, I thought, what if he finds out? What if she finds out? She has other things to worry about," Arya said dryly. "As does he." Arya's mind went back to that crucial day 3 months ago. Chloe hadn't just provided the password. She had provided the key to Serafina's psychology. "She's not just greedy Mrs. Vance," Chloe had explained, her voice trembling. "She's vain. She can't stand being ignored. She hates you because you have everything she wants, and you don't even seem to try. She thinks you're weak." "Let her," Arya had replied. "She wants to replace you, publicly. She said her dream was to go to the Unity Gala, the one Mr. Vance is being honored at, and force you out. To make you look small." A plan had clicked into place in Arya's mind. "A public confrontation." "Yes," Chloe whispered. "Then we shall give her one," Arya had said. "But it will be on my terms, not hers." Arya had used Chloe's intel to build the perfect trap. She knew Serafina would be smuggled in. She knew Serafina would seek her out. And she knew Serafina, when confronted by Arya's unbothered facade, would do something physical, something staining. The white dress had been bait. The restraining order was the snare. Mr. Harrison was the executioner. Now, in the dim light of the bar, Arya reached into her clutch and pulled out a slim navy blue envelope. She slid it across the table. Chloe looked at it confused. "Open it," Arya said. Chloe's hands trembled as she opened the flap. Inside was not a check. It was a letter on heavy cream-colored cardstock. It was a formal job offer. Vance Innovations. Head of International Logistics Strategy. Chloe whispered, her eyes filling with tears. "But this is a vice president position. This is my proposal." "Your proposal, which I read," Arya said. "It was brilliant. My father would have been impressed. The board was also impressed when I presented it to them last week as the new direction for the company." Chloe was stunned. You presented it?" "Anonymously, of course. I told them I had a consultant working on a new plan. They ratified it this morning. The position is yours. The salary is in the contract. You'll be reporting directly to the new CEO." "The new CEO?" Chloe asked. "Me," Arya said with a faint smile. Chloe stared, speechless. "You were wronged, Miss Benson," Arya said, her voice softening for the first time. "Serafina and Marcus. They build their lives by stealing from others. We don't. We build. You deserved that job. Now you have it." Arya stood up, buttoning her coat. "My car will take you home. I expect to see you at the 900 a.m. emergency board meeting tomorrow. We have a company to save." Chloe Benson, the temp from accounting, looked at the contract, then at the woman who had just orchestrated the most stunning corporate and social takeover in a decade. "Thank you, Mrs. Vance," Chloe said, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you." "Don't thank me, Ms. Benson," Arya said, turning to leave. "Just be brilliant." The sun rose over Central Park, but Arya Vance had been awake for hours. She was not in the sprawling, opulent townhouse she had shared with Marcus. She was in her other residence, a sleek, minimalist penthouse high above the city, a place he had never known existed. It was her sanctuary, her war room, and today it was her throne. On the floor, in a heap of ivory silk and dark, dried-out stains, lay the gala dress. It looked like a casualty of war, a shed skin. Arya showered and immaculate stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking at her reflection. The woman staring back was not the ice queen of last night. The soft, society-approved edges were gone. She was dressed in a tailored navy blue suit by a designer known for their severe architectural lines. Her hair was pulled back into a tight, functional chignon. She was wearing armor. Her phone, sitting on the glass coffee table, was a command center, and it was alive with the fires of the new world she had just created. The first explosion had been Diana Croft's, which had dropped at 300 a.m. The Forbes headline was brutal: "Titanic disaster. Vance, Innovations CEO, honored as Gala explodes in scandal. Mistress arrested board, calls emergency audit." The article was a masterpiece of journalistic evisceration. Croft, using Arya's breadcrumbs, had already connected the anonymous donor ticket to Serafina Rivers and hinted at significant financial irregularities in the company's new logistics ventures. The financial world had reacted instantly. VNN stock, which had closed at a record high, had plummeted 38% in pre-market trading. Billions in market cap wiped out in a matter of hours. At 7:01 a.m., her private line rang. It was Susan Gray, her lawyer. "He's here, Arya, in my conference room." And Arya's voice was calm. And he looks like he's aged 20 years. He's still in his tuxedo. He hasn't slept. He tried to negotiate. He threatened. He even, I think, tried to cry. But he signed. I reminded him, Susan said, a rare hint of satisfaction in her voice, that the federal wire and mail fraud charges I had packaged for the U.S. Attorney's Office carried a mandatory minimum of 10 years, and that was before we discussed the embezzlement of company funds. He signed everything, Arya. The resignation, effective immediately, citing pressing personal health matters. The shares, the full transfer of his 22% voting block, every share he acquired using Davenport seed money, is now in your trust. It's done. You own 62% of Vance Innovations, outright. Good. Thank you, Susan. Have the file sent to Arthur Holloway. Already done. Arya hung up and looked at the next message, a text from Mr. Harrison, received at 7:30 a.m. Subject: Rivers, released 6:15 a.m. Bail posted by an SR Consulting account, likely the last of her funds. At 7:05 a.m., she attempted to gain access to Mr. Vance's private residence. She was denied entry by his security team. She is now at her Tribeca condo, which the bank is already moving to repossess. Her lawyers are frantic. They've called my office Ms. Gray's and the Vance Innovations PR department. They are offering full cooperation on the embezzlement charges in exchange for the assault charges being dropped. Arya stared at the message. Serafina. The foolish, arrogant girl who thought a red dress and a stolen man made her a queen. She was now a loose end, a pawn left on the board, realizing too late that she'd been played by everyone, especially the man she'd supposedly won. Arya texted back one word to Harrison. Decline. Serafina had made her choice. She would face the consequences alone. She was a lesson, not a threat. At 8:15 a.m., her line rang again. Arthur Holloway. Arya, he said, and his voice was no longer just grim. It was humbled. My God, I've just seen the file Susan sent. The real one. The Singapore accounts, the timelines. He was going to gut us, Arya. He was going to gut your father's company and leave us all holding the bag. I know, Arthur. That's why I had to do it this way. A clean cut. A clean cut. You've started a wildfire, my dear. But you're the only one with the water. The board is assembling. They're terrified. They're looking at a 40% stock drop and no CEO. They have a CEO, Arthur, Arya said. They just don't know it yet. A pause. I'm nominating you, he said, his voice firming. Interim for now, but we both know it will be permanent by next week, given your new controlling stake. And, frankly, the fact you just saved us from federal prison, I expect it to be unanimous. The company is yours, Arya. Your father's company. I accept the nomination. I'll be there at 9:00 a.m., and Arthur call Chloe Benson in accounting. Have her brought to the boardroom. She has a presentation on logistics strategy that the board needs to see. Chloe Benson. Very well. See you in 45 minutes, Madam CEO. She hung up. It was done. All the pieces moved in silence had now checkmated the king. At 8:45 a.m., as she was gathering her papers, the intercom buzzed. It was Robert the doorman, his voice nervous. Mrs. Vance. Madam. Mr. Marcus Vance is in the lobby. He's not on my list, but he's making a scene. He demands to see you. Arya walked over to the security panel and pressed the video button. There in the pristine gold leaf lobby was her husband. He was a wreck. His tuxedo was torn. His hair was wild. His face a mask of sleepless, desperate fury. He was shouting at the doorman, jabbing his finger. The Titan of the Year was a common drunk. Arya pressed the talk button. Her voice was as clear and cold as the glass she looked through. "Robert?" The shouting stopped. Marcus froze, looking up at the camera he knew she was behind. "Robert," she repeated. "You are correct. He is not on my list. He is a disgruntled former employee. Please have him removed from the premises. If he refuses, you have my full authority to call the police." She turned off the monitor, cutting him off mid-shout. Her phone buzzed. A text from him, a last pathetic attempt. "You won't get away with this. You'll run that company into the ground. You need me." Arya looked at the message. She thought of the museum piece and the Ice Queen. She realized they were never insults. They were miscalculations. A museum piece is priceless, protected, and lasts forever. An Ice Queen rules a frozen, silent kingdom, and nothing gets in without her permission. She didn't just delete the message. She blocked his number. A final digital banishment. She picked up her briefcase. It wasn't her small, elegant Gala clutch. It was her father's restored leather attaché case, which had sat in her closet for 10 years, waiting. She walked out the door, her heels clicking on the marble floor. She didn't look back at the ruined white dress. The reign of Marcus Vance had ended in a spectacular splash of red wine. The reign of Arya Vance was just beginning in a flood of cold black ink. And just like that, the game was over. What Serafina thought was an attack was just the final move in Arya's checkmate. This story just goes to show you never, ever underestimate the person who seems to have nothing left to lose. They might just be the one holding all the cards. What did you think of Arya's revenge? Was it brilliant justice, or was it colder than the ice she was named for? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. I read every single one. If you love stories of epic drama, satisfying twists and justice served cold, then you are in the right place. Don't forget to hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs a little drama, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel and ring that bell. You won't want to miss the story I have for you next week.